Right into it. I'm going to start talking about innovation a little bit. I love innovation, but I kind of hate the way the word is overused. I have this love-hate relationship because it's often misused. It seems like it's a checkbox in every kind of business presentation that's out there. I think there's a really big difference between iteration and innovation. They're often intertwined a little bit. This is sometimes obvious for some people, but it's sometimes worth restating. Iteration is doing the same things better. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually great. It's great learning grounds where you can actually learn fast, get some quick wins. Doing innovation is doing new things completely. Very, very different. Disruption, which is another obvious buzzword, doing new things that make the old ones completely obsolete. That's kind of the unicorn of innovation. Very few of them around, but they do happen every once in a while. Words are important, so I want to make sure that we describe innovation appropriately. Innovation transforms the useful seeds of ideas into widely adopted solutions, valued above every existing alternative. And I think that's really, really important when you're evaluating what you're doing. Is it truly innovative, or how you're positioning your company and your product? I've been really, really fortunate in my career to be able to work on a number of very innovative companies. It's funny, actually. Hindsight and time isn't necessarily kind to innovation, because when you look back on things, you're like, it's not that innovative. At the time, it was, right? So Chapters Indigo, if you put this in perspective, Amazon didn't exist yet in Canada. There was actually no retailer doing any e-commerce. There was 10 of us in the back of a book warehouse out by the airport trying to figure out how to ship books. And I remember describing it to people saying, hey, yeah, go to this website, you read book reviews, you can click and we'll send a book to your house and it'll arrive in a week. And people are like, why would I do that? There's a bookstore just down the street. That makes no sense. Went from there, and it was very successful. It was Silicon Valley's Sequoia Capital's first international IPO. We did very well here in Toronto. Went down to Silicon Valley after that, a little startup called eBay. I was fascinated with the idea of not just traditional commerce, but the idea of a sharing economy in a marketplace. And imagine describing eBay for the first time to people. You're going to buy someone else's used shit, sight unseen. You're going to send money in the mail, and you're going to hope the product gets to you. And you're going to just trust this whole process works. And on top of that, we're going to gamify it to you. It's because it's going to be based on auction, so you think you've won it. It's actually, and in a lot of ways, there's a lot of innovation around trust and marketplaces and the sharing economy. Some of the principles there are still, intertwined into so many different other marketplaces. PayPal, same thing. Imagine first describing PayPal as, okay, every bank has ever told you never share your financial information with anyone. You're going to give all your credit card, all your bank information, all your identity to us, and we're going to do transactions on your behalf. It's going to be safe, it's going to be easy, it's going to be better. Just trust us. Everyone is like, that is not going to happen. It took years to get that off the ground. It seems obvious now, and everyone's like, oh yeah, PayPal is such an easiest thing, but it's not. Same thing with gold money. The whole notion of blockchain and the idea of being able to create a real-time settlement rail for money, being able to go between currency crosshairs, commodity money, crypto. If I want to send money to my sister in Australia, I should be able to send her $100 Australian, and it arrives there in less than 20 seconds. We're able to do that many years before real-time rails are still as an experiment within the banking framework. But again, it was very good. Speaking on blockchain, we're going further into that, and I'm very interested in how we're going to do things with verified.me. Digital identity, I think, is an area that will have a banner year in 2019. It is an issue that spans the entire internet. It's not just digital identity, it's identity in general, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a large bank, a fintech here, you deal with a lot of compliance and regulatory issues, but anyone doing and transacting anywhere, you need to prove who you are. And that continues to get harder and harder to do. Identity validation is broken for citizens and organizations. It needs to work in call centers better. It needs to work in person and online better. I'm going to take a wild guess here, and you can tell me whether I'm right or not, but everyone in this room probably has between 100 and 120 online accounts where their information has been copied and stored. Of that 100 to 120, you probably use 3 email addresses and a phone number to validate yourself, and probably one of 5 passwords. You make life real easy for hackers. But that's just the reality of where we live. And the funny thing is we don't value our identity nearly enough as we should, because the hackers are, and they're making a lot of money on it. And companies are who's gathering all the information because they're doing a lot with it and they're monetizing it more than the products that they sell. And the headlines continue to grow further and further here in terms of information being stolen all the time. I don't know if this video looks a little funky here. See if this is going to work. Maybe not. Oops, sorry. Yeah. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It's not a big deal. Yeah, I can share it after the event. All it really is it actually shows some of the world's biggest hacks over time. And not only have the amount of hacks of identity continue to get higher frequency every year, each attack gets bigger and bigger, and the severity of them continue to get larger and larger. And we're talking like 10,000 people attacks like 7, 8 years ago to 500 million people with 200 million passports being stolen. But biometrics is going to fix all this, right? Everyone talks about biometrics and the great role that it does. Most biometric systems have been hacked as well. The problem with biometrics is it is one-dimensional. It's binary, it's right or wrong, one or the other. And it is just one element of identity. In fact, solving identity requires 3 things. There's knowledge in terms of what I know, questions that could be about me, information about me in my past. What I have could be the SIM card of my phone, my devices. These are all ways to identify where I am and how I am intersecting with other people, and what I am from a biometric. But no single entity has all of these units exclusively. But companies continue to gather more and more data, and they're hoarding it. And the problem here is now all we're doing is creating more and more honeypots of data everywhere. This is not the way how we got here. If you think about it, the first 10, 15 years of the internet, the entire concept was the information era, about being able to copy and share information easily. I can share photos, I can share emails, I can share content, I can self-publish. The whole idea was about sharing and copying. So why wouldn't, of course, that's what we did with our identity as well. We copied and shared it everywhere. Identity should be treated like money. It's a currency. It, in many ways, has more value than typical currencies. And there isn't one bank or one tech company that's going to solve this. That's not necessarily the right approach. The approach that we've looked at SecureKey is like, we need to figure out how we can build a network that everyone can participate in. An ecosystem approach that protects people's privacy in the best way possible. It crosses industries and markets, a wide appeal for multiple use cases. Your data is decentralized. It's not about putting all of your information together. It's about being able to access it where it's most relevant and important, and a system that's very scalable. This is a really big challenge. So SecureKey has been building the system now quietly in the background for several years, and we are proudly going live fairly soon. All 7 banks, major 7 banks in Canada have participated. I would argue it's probably the largest blockchain project, not just in Canada, but globally. Once we do go live, we'll probably have more accessible data, not only for the Canadian market, but we're running pilots in the US as well. Effectively what it is, it puts your identity in your control. You have your relationships today that have your digital assets, and there's different levels of where you store your information. The government has data on you, banks have data on you, credit unions, your telco. Those are kind of like primary sources of data. And you have digital asset providers that can facilitate access to all of that information. That should be widely available very quickly to be able to do account openings, self-registrations, verifications, logins, and account maintenance. And it's not about necessarily sharing my information. It's about being able to prove I am who I am instantly and very efficiently. And there's tons of scenarios, whether you're dealing, whether you're a fintech. We all know about the dealings of KYC and onboarding customers and friction that exists there. Well, if I'm a RBC customer today and I want to open a bank account at a fintech, I should be able to have RBC validate I am who I am, along with Equifax, along with the government. That should be packaged up and sent to the fintech and validated within 20 to 30 seconds. And we do that and using blockchain, of course. And I actually would argue identity could be the catalyst use case for blockchain, not currency. It has all of the principles of being able to have immutable proof, distributed access to information in real time, distributed consensus, and being able to prove people who they are. So we're very excited in where that's going in this year, but I figured I would share some lessons learned, and not only in the last couple of years on building up SecureKey, but with some of the other projects that we've worked on. There is no innovation and creativity without failure. That goes without saying. Whether at a larger company or a smaller company, I still see it no matter where. You need to expand your failure appetite and be okay with it. It's counterintuitive, I know, to the ego mind, because we all want to have successes and celebrate the successes, but just accept the failures. Like if you're not failing, I know there's lots of cliches out there, you're not doing things enough right. It can never be overstated enough. And so I felt like wanted to start with the obvious here. Enable degrees of independencies in order to innovate and fail, and don't worry about it. Just make it happen. The learning process there is incredible. Innovation is not just building a new technology. That's the foundational piece. Great innovation is a combination of being able to apply technology against a significant unmet customer need and being able to apply an appropriate business model to it. And I only say this because it amazes me how many conversations I've had with dev teams and product teams who love to geek out on technology and new code and new frameworks, and they're obsessed with the features. And I've sat in meetings for hours and not heard one benefit. That's what's really, really important is don't be focused on the features, being focused on the benefits. Again, this is something that's so obvious to some people when I say it, but I still see it in so many companies. Either I'm the advisor of a number of different companies or investor in others. I still see people obsessed with features and tools and widgets that they're building and not enough on the benefits that they're actually focused on building. And probably most importantly, be wary of perceived wisdom. People are always fighting the status quo, can be tricky in a very corporate setting. When new products risk cannibalizing old businesses, emotions unavoidable to get heated. I had a conversation last week about a company working with Verify.me that just had to realize that they're going to cannibalize a $30 million revenue line for them in order to participate with this process, but they realize it's something that they need to do. And they know in the long run that this actually is going to be a much more stable environment for them long term. I won't say who they are, but they're critical conversations to have. And shine the spotlight on indecision. It drives me nuts when people will go through a battle and they still won't come to a decision process on things. Call it out. Call bullshit. How much do we need to know in order to make a decision? Is probably one of the best questions that need to be answered, because otherwise people go through analysis paralysis and we'll have every excuse in the book before they can actually move ahead on something. And that's always going to be against your drive for innovation. I'm going to leave it there because I know I've spoken over time. I want to have enough time for questions, but hopefully that was valuable for people. I'm happy to stick around afterwards as well in case we're running over time and talk about anything related to identity, blockchain, you name it.
Outside of Canada? Sure. Are you seeing big personal identity trends outside of Canada?
In terms of other companies doing different things, there are a couple of interesting other identity projects that are out there coming from different approaches, whether it be self-sovereign identity and the ideology around that. But I do believe that is a much further down the road process. At the end of the day, if you're going to actually need to do something significant, people are only going to rely on federated identities that know that they can prove you from existing trusting organizations. It's all nice and dandy to say that my t-shirt says I'm Darrell, so I'm going to tell you I'm Darrell. But unless the government or your bank or other trusted institutions can truly validate you with the identity they have with you, it's a long way from that. I mean, we're almost in 2020 and people are still writing paper checks, right? So, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll get to you next.
So I understand the case point for using blockchain for getting security around your identification. My only, I guess, question would be around, say I do trust you with all of my information and you have all of the identity. So currently if something gets hacked, for example, it's only that particular thing that gets hacked. whereas the rest of my identity is safe. What would be your, I guess, like risk plan for if, say, in the future, like right now, blockchain is safe enough, but as technology gets better, people also get smarter, and there will be maybe a time where blockchain will also be able to get hacked. So what would be the thing you would be able to put into place, or what are the thoughts around if my full identity is getting hacked all at once? Yeah. How would you take care of that?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. So to be clear, we are not proposing to be pooling all of your identity in one place to make it even more convenient for hackers to be able to hack. That's not the point at all. It's decentralizing the data and keeping it where it is. And quite frankly, I think we're oversharing our information today. I'll give you an example of let's say a landlord and a tenant scenario, right? If I'm a landlord and I have a tenant that wants to come in, I want to know he is who he says he is. I don't need to know his exact credit score. I just want to say, I want to know, is his credit score over 700? Does he make more than $100,000? Is he gainfully employed? So the CRA can validate that, Equifax can validate that, the bank can validate his information, his previous address. They don't actually have to give me any of that information. Those relationships that I already have and are trusted can answer questions. We call them claims against my identity to prove I am who I say I am. So I'm not actually copying or sharing any of that information or pulling it all together to be able to package up to someone conveniently. And so I think that's very important in the sense of it's not about copying and sharing and packaging your identity together. It's about wherever I have trusted relationships today that should be able to validate me for the most appropriate use case that I need.
Yeah. You were talking earlier about the problem of identity being binary, which is either it's validated or not.
Biometrics, yes.
Does it mean that you're working on continuous authentication? And if yes, what are the factors that you chose or you're working on?
Yeah, so real-time authentication. Yeah, there's a number of components that are there. I mean, the beauty is you've got a phone on you. So I can at any time, at any point of any transaction, if it's a remote one and I need to validate you are who you say you are. There's many different ways of doing that. Actually happened to me the other day in an Uber, which I thought was very cool. I was driving in the back of an Uber and all of a sudden the driver's app said pull over. They knew the driver was driving. He had to pull over. They said take a selfie. We want to know you are who the registered driver of this car is. So they were actually validating and authenticating the driver in real time because that car had been on the road for too long, whatever the case is. So I mean, that's just one example, but there's a lot of different ways to be able to authenticate and triangulate someone, both the device, the location, doing a biometric, and a variety of other elements in real time and ongoing for a whole bunch of different transactions. Yeah.
Hi, Darrell.
Hi.
I want to ask you a question. It seems like you've done a pretty good job of picking the winners in your career path. It's pretty safe to say. So if you were to go back to when you were in your mid-20s, let's say 25, 26, 27, what companies or industries are currently getting you excited?
If today?
Yeah, advice for a 25-year-old or something like that.
So... you know, in my era, that was kind of like when I was at 25, it was kind of the early categories of like entertainment, commerce, retail, information that way, and media. Those are ones that were being disrupted. Today, I would say it's probably more around education. Well, fintech and financial services obviously is going through a kind of an era as well. I would say education, healthcare, transportation, and financial services are probably the four biggest sectors. We'll probably see the biggest change over the next decade. If you want to say if you're 25 and want to see where you can have the most impact over the next decade, probably those four verticals.
Are there any specific questions you ask yourself to validate whether a company is going to be, let's say, the next PayPal? Or do you look at culture? Is there any specific elements of the technology you look at? Or what are the big things that pop out when you're picking a company?
The interesting thing of all of those companies I worked for is actually their technology wasn't the best. There were a lot of our competitors always had better technology.
So what was it?
I think it was a combination of being able to articulate and communicate the benefit to users very effectively and focusing on that benefit-driven harness really, really hard. A lot of grit and hustle by the people that are within the company. The culture of those people were phenomenal, and it excites me even when I go on LinkedIn today and I see where they all are at different companies, whether they're CEOs of different companies. One of my friends just took his company public on NASDAQ last week and stuff. It's very, very cool. I'm very fortunate to, and I think we fed off each other. We were able to have an environment where we were able to have that independence to be able to go innovate, to not worry about failing, being able to really, really drive each other and have each other's back. Ask tough questions. Passive aggressiveness is the death of innovation. It's sometimes being polite kills progress.
One last one over here. Hey, so there are other kind of online verification, identity verification systems like Keybase or something. Why have you not taken the same approach that they have? Or if you've decided not to, why do you think their approach is wrong?
I don't know if their approaches are wrong or not. I think every company is going to have a different approach. That's fine. So I don't have anything negative to say about that. I just feel like if I look at what are some of the foundational relationships that if we could be sticky within, and partially from a SecureKey standpoint, so they manage a service called Concierge for the federal government today. So they manage more than 10 million logins a month into government services. So there's a lot of learnings there, a lot of understanding of what works and what doesn't for customers. Part of that login service is the banks. So if you can have all of the banks and all the government provide all the information on you to validate you up front, it's a pretty good base. And I would say it's a pretty good competitive advantage where all of them have said that they're not going to want to work with everyone. They want to work with one or two trusted parties in order to figure out how to do that. So we're very proud to be one of those ones that they're selecting. And so we think that's a good foundational base. I also think when you're building something like this, it's based on trust. Trust doesn't move at the speed of technology. It just doesn't. You can build the coolest thing, but it takes a while for people to trust you and to be able to build that relationship and do more things with you. But if you have your trusted relationships like your bank and your government saying, yep, we've got your back. We're using this service as well. We're providing the anchors to this service. You're drafting off of trust. And I think that's very, very important for any fintech in here on how you can figure out how to draft and build a trust relationship, much more than just a marketing relationship.